Okay, we're back. I don't know why I say we're back. I just started the podcast, not like people are like, oh my God, but I'm here with Tom Ivers, one of the best boxing people in the business, the underrated weapon, the secret weapon of the sport, one of the many secret weapons. Tom, thank you for jumping on here and making this show better.
Hey, anytime, mate. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so I mean, I know you don't want to put yourself over, but shit, man, or shoot, I shouldn't cuss. Family censored program. Um, you go to Inoue Nakatani, you go to Fabio Wardley versus Daniel Dubois, which might be one of the most exciting fights in recent history, and then you went to Dave Allen versus no, I'm, but what's this month been like for you with going to all these fights that are very consequential?
Yeah, it's been a very different month because the fights in that have been very important in different ways, but also completely different fights. Like Inoue Nakatani was the most. It was so surreal because it was almost like I can't explain it. It was a sport. There was no drama. Nobody giving each other any shit at the weigh-in. No, very respectful. But then I went to Wardley Dubois, and it was very different. Everything again, it kind of it reminded me of like they had this thing called the cauldron at the way, and it was all very in your face showbiz, and it was almost like two completely different sports, if that makes sense. Even though they were both two world title fights.
Well, I mean, I think that was the big takeaway I got from the Inoue Noctani because I'm a loser. I mean, a boxing guy, or maybe that's interchangeable. Um, I woke up at 5 a.m. in my time zone to watch the fight, and I saw some people on the timeline going, "Oh man, where's the drama? Where's the people talking?" And it was like this very like fine art performative dance watching something occur. Whereas, like, modern society, Western world is what Wardley Dubois felt like, where it's like, here's the alcohol sponsor, here's the DJ. And I think that for me personally, as a fan of the sport, there was something a little refreshing about seeing Inoue Nakatani presented in a different way. How does that, and I'm saying things in a terrible way that don't like get you to get going with an answer, but I guess my question to you is, um, how was it live compared to like a traditional in your face DJ experience?
Oh, I loved it just because I felt it was such it almost felt like amateur boxing, but not in terms of level, in terms of just how it's get the fights in. It was just focused on the sport. The main event was on at 9 p.m., which is I don't know about in the US, but in the UK to have a main event at 9 p.m. is ridiculous kind of thing. Like it's we're getting to about midnight now by the time the main event gets in the ring. There was no kind of pauses between fights. Everyone was just like, right, next one in. They still like had the ring walks and everything, but there wasn't. I think there was a show on in Germany on Friday that Tris went to, and they had a magician on. They had about four rap acts and stuff, and I just like boxing doesn't need that. It just kind of boxing speaks for itself. When it's really good boxing, you don't need anything else. And I think it was refreshing to see that it was just the two top guys in the sport. There was no need for any bad language or giving each other abuse in the build to build the fight. That's all it was, and I really appreciate. It was really good to see. Kind of, it's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was just old school tough men seeing who's the tougher of the two. And it feels like boxing nowadays, we're getting to a place of like, how much can we fit in? There's a weird thing with boxing, right? And then we'll get into Keyshawn Davis is that like, pick your favorite pro sport. They wouldn't just let someone who's famous enter the pro sport. But boxing, we're like, oh man, this guy's pretty famous. Our sport might be in a weird spot. Let's get the famous guy. Let's treat and like that's kind of like been more and more normalized that like, hey, he doesn't have a traditional background, but he's really famous. You got to respect it. He hustled to have the followers. And you look at Nakatani and Inoue, and it's just sport for sport. And I think that I hope that the trend isn't we're getting away from that, but it was really refreshing. Like I'm saying the same thing as you, but it was refreshing to just see something as just like this is a boxing match as opposed to let me give you the context of how famous this person is.
Yeah, and I think it did a million pay-per-view buys or something like that, which is like a record in Japan. I'm guessing most of the pay-per-views were in Japan, but that just says it alone, really, doesn't it? That when the product is good enough, you don't have to kind of hype it up with nonsense. If it's the two fighting the best, people will watch it, people will pay for it. You don't need to blow it up with other stuff.
Well, you scored it a draw. I had it 1 point for Inoue. What was the experience like being there live?
It was interesting, but the atmosphere was the most different thing. I've covered fights in Japan before, but this was a little bit different. It was in the UK especially. I know the UK crowd get a lot of plaudits for being so lively, but I personally, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, the last time I paid to go to a fight, and I didn't go again just because of that everyone's drunk kind of stuff, and I don't really like that kind of atmosphere. And then the crowd in Japan were just very respectful. They'd applaud when somebody got tagged or punched. They'd chant it if their fighter was down on the cards or not doing well. They just chant their name. There was no kind of like abuse thrown in the ring. There was nothing. It was really like even that was really refreshing, to be fair. But yeah, being there live, they have the press quite far back, which I wasn't a big fan of. So you are watching on the screens really. But yeah, it was such a different kind of atmosphere to that something that I'd ever been in really.
And then like Wardley-Dubois, kind of the opposite. It's like this mega card of British fighters. You get to the main event, and it's like this brutal fight where like there's so many different stories in the beginning of the fight, and then the damage to the face, and then I think there's drama around should the fight be stopped or not. But I think there's also a hidden underlying story that Wardley like has made so many comebacks that like there's a fondness in your heart. Like, am I going to stop it too soon because this is the comeback guy? What was the sentiment there? What was the emotion in that building like? And did you feel as though Wardley could make a comeback being there?
I think the fight would have been stopped earlier if Wardley hadn't have dropped Dubois twice already. I think because he'd proved that he could have him down and that he could hurt him, it went on a little bit too long. I understand why they kept him in there because he's done it time and time again. But I think, what was it, stopped in the 11th? Round 10 was an uncomfortable watch. And I think everybody ringside was right. This is probably going on a little bit too long now. He was throwing still. That's the problem with Wardley. Like normally you stop those kind of fights because they kind of go into their shell and they're not really doing much. But Wardley keeps fucking swinging, so it's not that you can't use the excuse that he's not throwing back. But because every time you think, oh, it's getting a bit uncomfortable, come back and he'll kind of stop the momentum a bit. But I thought with his eyes like that, I was surprised the doctor didn't stop it. You've seen fights stop for a hell of a lot less. But yeah, I thought it went on a little bit too long. I thought maybe round 9, it probably should have been stopped. But again, you can't help but give Wardley a chance because he's pulled it out the fire so many times.
I think that's what it was like there, like, it's like, even though you've seen that movie before, you're kind of like, is this guy going to have another one of these special moments? And it's like, even though it's like he might hurt him, and I feel like there was a little bit of unfair criticism to Ben Davison just because like it's hard to stop a fight when you have like the Cinderella man in there.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one, and I never, I almost think as well, if the ref's not stopping it and the doctor's not stopping it, you can't really give Ben Davison any stick because we all know that that Wardley has pulled out the fire, but as well the referee in there, Howard Foster, is famous for kind of pulling fighters out early. He obviously did the one with George Groves against Carl Froch, but he also did Joseph Parker with Fabio Wardley, which got a bit of criticism as well. So he's famous for not letting fighters kind of have that chance. So the fact that he let it go on also kind of shows that he wasn't maybe as worried as. But I did think he was looking for an excuse to stop it for about 2 rounds. But Fabio, again, every time maybe Howard was about to jump in, he just comes back with a couple of swings that kind of stop the momentum again. So he kind of keeps himself in fights, Fabio, just by doing that.
Let's now switch over to Keyshawn Davis. I know you were there for the Dave Allen fight. I want to touch on that in the back. With Keyshawn Davis, title of the show, Talent or Maturity. To me, Keyshawn is quite obviously a pound for pound level talent. But there's a maturity component to him that over the next 2-3 years is going to define whether he can be a pound for pound talent. Now I'm going to do a small soapbox rant because it's my stupid podcast and I do soapbox rants. And it's what I do. But the missing weight twice, the first time in homecoming, the fight doesn't happen with Edlin De Los Santos. And then this fight, point two, not as big of a deal, but we're starting to get a habit. And I've always said, not that anyone's like, man, what does Lukie say about weight? Like, it's not that fascinating. I'm not that important. But I've always thought that making weight is never about a weight class. It's about a mentality in your brain. And the missing weight moves up with you because you can never set the discipline at the new weight class. Like, it's all guys that miss weight at lightweight. When they move up, they're like, I can get away with this and that. I am torn on the potential of Keyshawn Davis because I can't tell where the talent meets the maturity. The 2-point deduction, at times he doesn't seem focused. I'm looking for someone like yourself, very smart boxing guy. Where do you look at this? Am I overstating this, or is this a real thing to look at?
I also think I think you're completely right. It is habits, and it's like when he's moved up, he's like, oh, it's fine. I've got, was it 5 pounds to spare now? But he's still struggling. But I also think his coach Ronnie Shields said, because Brian Norman also missed weight, didn't he? Their scales were a bit off, and I kind of understand that because I've had that myself. Where in the amateurs we'd get on scales, and we'd be like, oh, we're all fine, and then we'd go, and the scales that we were weighing in on that day were a bit off, and you've missed weight. So that sometimes happens, and the fact that it was only Keyshawn was 0.1, Brian Norman was 0.2. I can kind of see that it was probably just their scales were maybe a little bit heavy, and then their scales were under, sorry, and then the ones that they were weighing in on were a little bit over. So that can happen. But what he said after the fight gave me a bit more concern when he was like, "Oh, I'm not into this making weight kind of stuff," and because he's not the biggest 140 pounder either. I understood it when he was at lightweight. He was a big lightweight, but he's probably a natural 140 pounder. I remember when he boxed Jermaine Ortiz in the last fight, I thought Ortiz looked a lot bigger than him. He looked a little bit bigger than Albright this time, to be fair. I'll give him that. But if he's to go up to welterweight, he'll kind of lose the size advantage. He'll probably be a lot smaller than the likes of, he called out Devin Haney, So I would like to see him stick around at 140 just because, as well as he hasn't won a world title there, but you may as well tick that off whilst you're there. But it's worrying when he's saying, I don't like this making weight kind of stuff. But I suppose like Mayweather towards the end of his career was at 154 and he wasn't really killing himself or anything to make weight. But Keyshawn's young. You can't really be. These are the times where you should be ticking off these weight classes. So it is a little bit worrying.
I'm with you on that last part. Is like, yes, I get Floyd probably didn't cut that much weight. We don't know how much he did, but it was older Floyd. It's like established Floyd. It's veteran. It's emeritus status Floyd. This is making my case to be a pound for pound boxer, Keyshawn Davis. And, part of, I have big questions around him because part of being a pro boxer is discomfort and making weight. The things that you don't like about making weight are going to appear in a pro boxing fight at times. And I'm not quite sure fully, like I could pretend that I know what it is or don't know what it is, but there's going to be elements of that weight cut that show themselves in the ring. And how do you respond to that? And that's my concern with Keyshawn Davis, and the maturity component is it's like there's a pattern of when things don't come to him naturally. It's like, okay, I'm going to just adjust. I'm Keyshawn. I can get away with it. And I'm starting to wonder, and I hate to say it, but I'll say it on the show. Is he kind of like a modern Broner? Is there a fear that he could turn into Adrian Broner, or he could turn into the next great American superstar? What do you think?
Yeah, again, obviously, I haven't watched tons of him because I have over the last few years tend to stick with the British stuff, but I have watched him since. Obviously, watched him a couple of fights prior to Berenchik, and he's incredibly talented. Like he's going to be a serious talent if he sticks the way he has been going. But they're definitely. I saw. I think we had a piece on Boxing Scene with his manager saying, because obviously the last fight with Albright, he got popped for doing marijuana, so that got ruled a no contest, and they kind of said he's completely changed since then. So I think his mentality has shifted. I think back a few years ago, maybe he didn't have the right head on his shoulders, but I think he's got a good team around him now. Ronnie Shields, especially, he's in a camp with some good kids. But
for clarity, I
yeah,
don't think Ronnie's his
yeah.
coach. I think it's Ronald Sims is an assistant coach, and I don't know. It's a Virginia guy that's the head coach. I think Ronnie is training Brian, and he gave a quote about the scale being messed up.
Oh, okay, yeah, that
And
makes
he just
sense.
was like,
Yeah,
like he's just like, man, this scale, it's and like,
yeah.
let's be real, right? We're gonna be two real guys. Virginia doesn't hold a lot of boxing fights. You might not know that being a UK guy, but it's like they
I
don't hold
heard
a lot
that.
of.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so it's like when you go somewhere that doesn't have a lot of fights, you can get a little like maybe a scale that's not perfect, right? It's like
hmm
how like you can get a stoppage when you go somewhere that it's a local doctor who's well intentioned and a guy gets a cut. The well intentioned doctor who's very kind goes, "Oh man, this guy's cut. Let's stop the fight," because he's not used to seeing boxing and he's a nice guy.
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Basically, the fight itself was not very good. Keyshawn dominated, but I was looking for more separation. Albright, I think, is an extremely talented contender who could win a belt if the right situation came up. But I also think that there's a talent gap there. And I was a little concerned at how, at times, that talent gap got closer.
hmm Yeah, well, he's also calling out some big names, Keyshawn, and he's yet to prove really that he's of that caliber. Like Devin Haney's a serious fight. I know people will give him a bit of stick for the Ryan Garcia fight, but he's still a serious contender. Had that brilliant win over Brian Norman Jr. just recently, but he's proven at that level. And Keyshawn Davis, although very talented, is still not proven he's kind of can compete with that level of fighter. People are pointing as well. Andy Cruz beat him quite handily a few times in the amateurs, and even Andy Cruz hasn't been able to compete too much with the top guys at lightweight, with losing to Murataya. So that kind of sometimes you think, oh, maybe Keyshawn's looked good at the level he's at, but when he steps up to that top level, maybe he might not have what it takes. And I guess we'll see. But I think he's calling for a fight with Devin Haney. I think that might be a little bit too soon for him.
It just seems like he wants money. Like he wants the money fights. It seems like he just doesn't want to do like the contender bouts, maybe even title fights if they're not. It just seems like he wants main event, pay-per-view quality fights against big names that get a lot of interest. And that's where his focus is. And that's where I go to that maturity thing, because like sometimes you can't buy experience. You've got to grow in the sport. And I just can't emphasize that like there's levels and steps. And I just feel as though, he's going to go one of two ways. He's going to be the next Shakur Stevenson, great American fighter, or it's going to be he's a great American fighter like a Ricardo Williams Jr., who's amazing Olympian, who, didn't reach his potential. And it's strange to say that about someone that I view as one of the centerpieces for American boxing.
Yeah, that's what he's probably the top talent really. Well, at least one of them really coming through. But yeah, you want to see people kind of addicted to boxing, and he doesn't give me that vibe, if that makes sense. Almost like Jared Anderson. I remember when he was coming through, you kind of almost got the sense that he's not here for the long run. He kind of just wants to get in and out, do his bit, and maybe kind of Keyshawn does give me that kind of little bit. But
It's
I almost respect that in a way, because it's a tough sport, and get in, get out, get paid, and if you can get those big fights quickly, do it. But no, I think he maybe needs a little bit more learning experiences before he takes on those big guys.
I think it's 50-50 for me. I think some of what he says is generational, and I'm now an old guy or an oldish guy. Like I went from being like a young internet punk who loved boxing to now being a jaded part of the establishment. And it just happened with a blink of an eye. Like I lost all my rebellion and now I'm the status quo. I'm like, where did it go? I used to be so edgy. And I think that during that time of like my transformation into like the past or like whatever, there's a mentality of young people of I want to make as much money as possible and then do cool stuff. So I think there is a cultural thing where Keyshawn Davis just wants to be kind of the cool young person. Like that's like that mentality of yeah, I'm here. That's like a cool guy thing for younger people. I think maybe I'm just out of touch. But then at times I do see that commitment to being the greatest fighter of the generation, but he's like battling the two personas. And I guess what my definition of maturity is, I want him to take ownership of one of them and to be more accountable, um, at least during fights. You know, I think that he just has these mental lapses where he gets emotional. And I think a Devin Haney could make him frustrated to the point where he could weaponize that. You know, if you start body slamming guys, they might egg you on more to try to get you disqualified. And I can't think of an elite level boxer who kind of had that weakness this early in their career.
Yeah, I suppose those question marks are over him because he's not really fought a top level guy. Even at lightweight, Brenchik's a wonderful fighter, but he was never the number one at lightweight. He's not fought a number one at 140. It doesn't look like he's going to. I know Shakur's his friend and doesn't like they'll ever fight, but it'd be nice to see him fight someone else. Even so, until he fights like a real top contender, I know Brenchik is still classes to that for me, but he'll always have a few question marks over him. And that's what we need to see him in with somebody who'll really push him. And I think if he's going up to welterweight already, maybe be nice to see him maybe in with the winner of Catchall Gearsov, somebody like that. But at 140, who is there apart from Shakur?
I mean,
Really?
Dalton Smith is a name I'd like
Oh
to see
yeah,
because he's a puncher, and you know, there's still some like I feel like he's the British fighter that doesn't get his due. Like as an
oh
American
100%.
fan, I'm always like, is he really that good? And then he knocks out Matisse, and you're like, I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Like you just never quite give him his due, and I feel like that would be a really exciting fight between the two.
Yeah, I think they had a little they saw each other recently. I can't think of one of it. I think it might have been the Ring Awards, maybe, where they kind of sized each other up a bit. That would be a brilliant fight. But Dalton Smith's got Puello first, which I think is a really tough fight for him because Dalton's always said to me he really likes fighting awkward southpaws, but Puello's a nightmare for anyone. I think so. But yeah, the winner of that, Keyshawn Davis against them, is a huge fight, especially if it's Dalton Smith either in America. Realistically, that would be massive. But yeah, that's the type of fights he needs really, because welterweight has got some really good fighters at the moment, and then if he let's say he goes up to 54 again, he's got some huge names. So if he can get some decent names at 140 first, just to kind of show that he's got that world class ability. Well, he's shown he's got world class ability, but he could show it in the ring. Then yeah, I think that's the Dalton Smith's the perfect fight. I think.
Yeah, I just to me, it's like this fight. And I guess I buried the lead a little bit on this, but I'm known for burying the lead. This was Top Rank's first fight on DAZN. It didn't quite feel like the traditional Top Rank product, and I swear we're going to get into British fights in a second, which you're the master of. But the matchup, I don't think for us sickos quite moved the needle. There was a little bit of a backstory and a grudge match, but it was a matchup where I think most people saw it as Keyshawn kind of knows how to beat him. There's some animosity, there's some anger there, but this is a favorable matchup for Keyshawn. And I think it kind of played out that way, is that it didn't move the needle maybe as much as you'd want with a consequential boxer.
Yeah, I suppose because there's not really normally a rematch, even though I suppose it was fed off the bit of the altercation they had a year ago when Keyshawn weighed in over the limit, and then they obviously had their fight. I know it was in the end ruled a no contest, but it wasn't controversial or anything, so everyone kind of expected Keyshawn Davis to win again. So I guess it didn't really move the needle in terms of we knew who was going to win the fight, really, even though Albright's coming off a great result as well. But yeah, that's the problem, I guess, when you know the result's going to happen, it kind of you don't. It was the same with Dave Hrgovic. I kind of lost interest quite early because even before it you just know the result that's going to happen.
let's segue over there and then we'll talk some undercard boxing in a second. But like with Dave Allen Hrgovic, I feel like I don't want to say all the smart boxing guys, but all the smart boxing guys kind of saw the writing on the wall. Olympian versus lovable big guy at the bar. Pretty much a big talent gap. The one thing I could try to talk myself into is if Dave takes it into the second half of the fight, Hrgovic gets tired. Within 30 seconds, you just knew how this fight was going. What was the sentiment from the ring walk to the opening punch? When like talk to me about just the feelings there.
I think anybody with this who's watched boxing in the last couple of years, or even year, especially at ringside, it was Dave Allen needs a miracle here. He needs like a. I'm not saying Tony Bellew's first win over David Hay was a miracle, but that kind of thing where steps back and snaps his Achilles or something like that, because they're just levels and levels and levels apart. They're nowhere near each other. And I used to look back to the Makhmedov fight. I thought Makhmedov was it was an easy night's work, even though Dave pushed him, but it was an easy night's work. And Filip Hrgovic is effectively a much better Makhmedov. They're very similar in style. He just does everything better. So it was always going to be that night. I think Dave's one of the most, what would you say, realistic people. He knows his limitations, and he probably slightly convinced himself that he could, maybe, if I do this, if I catch him here. But he knew he was up against it, and I know he got paid incredibly well for it, and quite rightly so, because he was in there with a real good heavyweight. And sometimes people forget that boxers are getting paid, and he only took that fight because not that he needed the money. He's been paid quite well recently, but the money on offer, he couldn't say no.
Let me, bald guy from America who thinks he knows boxing, hot take. I don't fully understand the Dave Allen experience, but I'm going to try to sum it up, and then you fill me in on what I'm getting wrong. This is like an IQ test for my boxing IQ. British fight fans kind of like the everyman, like a Ricky Hatton, the guy that could go to the pub, but also will give you a fight, very humble, give you a realistic answer, like, this might be a tough fight. There's like an endearing quality in British folk hero boxers like that. Then Allen has had ups and downs in his career, seems to right the ship, gets a win over Johnny Fisher, and he embodies all that stuff. So it's like a double whammy of the underdog is finally making it, but he's like the British everyman, and he's like the guy you could see at the bar. Is that kind of the appeal that built him to this level? Because I think that for a lot of people, they look at the record and they kind of see some of the antics, but they don't fully understand from America what the draw of Dave Allen is.
Yeah, I think the early days. I think in Britain, you want to see, even in the world, if you see a part of yourself in somebody, kind of draws you to them. And I guess he's just a regular bloke, so everybody kind of was drawn to him anyway. And he's hilarious for one. When he speaks from the heart, and he just says it how it is, which is always draws people in. But I remember the early days when he first came on the circuit, he was some of the stuff. I remember him putting socks down his pants at the weigh-in, and stuff like that. So he gained a bit of traction from that, and I remember after fights, he'd be like, I haven't even trained for this, and stuff like that. And it kind of caught on a bit that he was kind of like a lovable journeyman in a way, because he wasn't even training for these big fights. But then he'd take like Dillian White the distance and stuff like that, just being just a durable guy. But I guess, yeah, when he fell off the scene a bit after who did he get beat by? It was David Price, and then he came back against Dorian Darch. And I remember there was a bit of a confusion around, I think it was some irregular betting on that match. So I think that almost upset him with a few promoters. So yeah, and then he came back on the scene. He boxed Johnny Fisher in Saudi. Probably should have got the win that night. And then ever since then, I think he's always been a fighter who not struggles with belief, but a bit of motivation. And that kind of gave him the motivation to keep going. And fair play to him. Although he's only beaten Johnny Fisher, that's still his biggest win. He's made some serious money in the game. So, and he's such a lovely guy as well. That's the problem. he's one of your favorite guys to interview. He's just such a lovely guy, and if you could wish success on anybody, he would be the person.
And then I take it Hrgovic is probably going to get Moses Atuma coming off of this because he just basically had a cup of coffee like I'm having in the ring, gets his stoppage win. And I would assume that he's probably the number one choice for that August date. And probably Atuma does an Atuma to him.
Yeah, I think that's a really good fight because it looks pretty much set in stone. I remember at the press conference, the launch press conference, Hrgovic told me, he was like, "Oh, yeah, Atuma's in my contract." So that almost set things in motion. So I think almost this fight was just kind of to kind of build up Hrgovic, let him chin Dave Allen, makes him look a bit more indestructible. And then when Atama plays with him a bit, it makes Atama look even better. But yeah, I think it's actually a bit of a test for Atama because Hrgovic has got a serious chin. I remember his last fight with David Adelaide. He was taking some serious punches off Adelaide, and he can really, really whack. So I think it's going to be a contest where it goes into those later rounds. I can't see Atama chinning him early. And Hrgovic is, he's Olympic bronze medalist. He's got some serious ability. So I don't think it's an easy night's work. I think Atama will get tested for the first time. I think he'll get hit for the first time properly, and I think he'll get taken into those later rounds. I still think Atama will win, but I think this is the first time really where, not that I'm worried that Atama will get beat, but this is the first proper test of Atama's career because every other fight, I think it's been absolute certain that Atama's going to win. But this is actually the first time where I'm like, oh, this is a proper fight for him now.
Still waiting for Atama's Razor Reddick fight. He reminds me a little bit of Tyson, and it's like I'm waiting for those Bone Crusher Smith fights, the slow, deliberate, kind of boring, plodding fighters that slow the fight down. I have a controversial opinion on Atuma. I feel like he needs to get all of his big fights in the next 3 years because as he slows down, I think he's going to be more beatable. And I think he's one of the rare fighters who's at his best when he's younger and faster. And even though the experience might not be there, I think what troubles the top level fighters are traits that are going to go away as he's older. So that's my controversial hot take on Atuma is I think he needs to front load his career as much as possible.
I kind of get that. I get what you mean by that. Almost similar to like Mike Tyson, where he was at his best when he was young because he was so quick and powerful. And even when you get into your mid-20s, you do start to lose that. I think it's like when you're young, about his age, 20, 21, 22, you've just got so much this youth energy. You're so explosive. And yeah, I do get that. But I think the thing with it, Moses, he's he's got a good head on his shoulders where I think he listens to his coaches. So it's always like Floyd. He almost had two styles in his career, didn't he? He kind of adapted to be this more defensive master. So I think you'll see an adaptation in Atama. I know he's actually part of his family is from Eastern Europe. I think it's Serbia, where and he's kind of got that little Eastern European style where he shifts to the right, similar to Usyk, where southpaw shifts to the right. So I think you'll see him maybe blend into a bit more of a boxer as the years go on. But definitely, if he sticks to this style, it will take a bit of a plateau at some point because he's just so rapid. But that's because of his age. But yeah, I think he's got a good head on his shoulders. He's very mature for his age, so I think you will see him kind of shift into a more boxer style towards the later end of his career, maybe.
Yeah, I think he's the most exciting fighter in all of boxing. It's scary how little people in the U.S. know of him. I would say only the most hardcore boxing people know who he is currently. He's virtually unknown to... I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't even think there's a casual boxing fan anymore in the U.S. I think that the people that check for boxing are as hardcore. And I'd say amongst the hardcore fans, people know Moses Atuma as much as they know Nakatani's trainer, Rudy Hernandez. Rudy Hernandez, when I went to that July 11th press conference on a boat, which I was so excited to go to because I got to go on a boat. It's like I get to go on a boat. It's something different. One of the guys with Rudy goes, how many people do you think know Rudy? And I'm like, I don't know, 5 or 6 out of 10. And he goes, 3. They were in a gym and they say only 3 out of 10 people. We tested it. And I think Atuma could come to a U.S. boxing gym, and if people didn't tell him or he didn't have money around him, he could blend in anonymously. And I think that's kind of scary to me right now is Joshua had excitement in America, and the world is changing. But I'm saying a lot of words which don't really matter. They're kind of boring. But the big takeaway is Mo Zatuma is one of the most exciting fighters who will more than likely propel the sport upward.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he's by far the most exciting fighter in the sport. He's like, I've only seen him once live, but Jesus Christ, it was must watch. Like, he just didn't, he's just lightning quick, isn't he? He can punch with both hands. He's, oh, he should be bigger than he is completely. But I think that's partly because of his personality. He's very calm, hates doing interviews, hates the camera, which is kind of refreshing in a way, but he really doesn't like that. So that's always going to hold him back in that front, whereas Joshua was a bit of a commercial king where everybody wanted a piece of him and he was happy to do it. But Moses, I think he's going to have his US debut this year, apparently. That's what Frank wants anyway. So I think once that US debut's been done, he'll start to grow because once he fights in the US and people see that talent, they'll be all over him then.
Now I got to ask, on this card, there was some undercard action. Nothing really stood out to me. I watched a little bit of it. The Michael Gomez stoppage over Lee McGregor. I remember him from being in Vegas years ago. Anything notable that you saw there that you thought, like, a boxing fan should know about?
Not much really. They were good fights, weren't they? The Gomez and the McGregor fight was a really good fight for as long as it lasted. There was a one on before that was the British title fight. It was a good little scrap. It looks like the winners of them are going to face each other now, but especially in the US, I don't think any of those fighters will be coming over to the US anytime soon or making a mark. I don't think they're world level kind of thing. But Michael Gomez Jr., I'm not sure if his dad fought over in the States. Michael Gomez Sr., he was a bit of a local legend in Manchester. He was a good little fighter. But yeah, Gomez Jr., he's an entertaining one. He headbutted McGregor before the fight had even started. So he definitely, he makes you watch, but I'm not quite sure he's world level yet. So I don't think you'll be seeing him in the States anytime soon.
Okay, and then I'm not sure how much you know about the Top Rank undercard. I'm assuming you slept through most of it because it was on very early. But some notables: Brian Norman Jr. gets a stoppage win, rather routine, just outclasses a guy. Both Davis brothers didn't look great. Keyshawn Davis did enough, but I'm not seeing like the standout trait. He's a very young fighter. I'm not going to write a young fighter off because he's young, but you're not seeing the same elements of Keyshawn, and they have the same name, so you're going to get always compared to a superstar boxer, and I'm not seeing it. Quite frankly, Kelvin Davis is just looking like a contender level fighter who can't get past a certain level of contender bout. His fight against Pete Dobson was atrocious. And honestly, either one of them could have won. It was a draw. It wasn't a very good TV fight. And it just feels like between this fight and the Nahir Albright fight, we've found out the level he fights at. And then we follow that up with Jan Santana taking on Cristian Cruz, Pro Box TV veteran, who fought Yakubov last November. I was there in the building. Jan Santana, this is just a Lukie tangent, and you can get mad at it. Sometimes guys that are too talented rely on talent and overlook guys who are tough and have a gas tank. And this fight was eerily close because despite Santana being more talented, technical, all that crap, Cruz just made a decision to outwork him. And Santana all week had been calling for Bruce Carrington, big fights, etc. And I think there is a big concern of, yes, you're very talented. Yes, there's a skill set, but you still have to go through the developmental process to get to those fights. And this was a fight that could have been a draw, in my opinion. And it's always interesting when a prospect has that because you have to bounce back a certain way, or else I start to go, oh, that's who you are. That's my assessment of the Top Rank card. What did you see?
Yeah, the only fight I saw, so I saw the main event, obviously, and then I caught up with Brian Norman's fight. It actually looked like Wagner quit. I've seen him on UK shows before. He boxed Harlem Eubank. Harlem's a decent fight, not Brian Norman's level, and he got taken the distance by Wagner. But yeah, I thought Brian Norman looked really good, and that left hook, that left hand was on show. He dropped it twice. But yeah, it kind of looked like Wagner realized pretty early he was in there with a a different caliber of fighter. And then, look, I don't want to say a fighter quit, but it didn't look like there was too much trouble with his left shoulder. His corner were more or making out that it was worse than it is. So yeah, but Brian Norman definitely. I was impressed with him under his new coach.
Let me give my editorial on this. Not that anyone cares. Is when guys talk a lot of trash, I always feel like they're nervous. That's just like a thing with me. Like I've always felt like when a guy talks a gang of crap, there's a level of nerves. And all week, Wagner was talking. And I felt like there was anxiety because he had never really been in with that level. And it felt like the minute he tasted Norman's power, he couldn't talk. Like it's like I equate it to when I used to spar, because I hope you didn't experience this, but you get in there sometimes and there's just a guy who's faster than you. And you're in and you're like, okay, today I'm either going to do one of two things. I'm going to get beat up and accept getting beat up, or I'm going to have to kind of try to figure something out on the fly, and it's going to be difficult and I could get embarrassed, but I have to try to fight within myself. And it's like, it felt like he had that ultimatum very early on and just decided, I don't have it, or the pain and discomfort was there too quickly.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. You probably realized early on, this kid's just way better than me. He probably felt someone in the shoulder and he just probably thought, oh, I'm not sure. Like, I could go on, but he kind of probably used it as an excuse. He saw a way out of the contest and thought, I'll take that. I'm not beating this kid. So, yeah, he probably just looked for it. He saw an opportunity to take a little bit of a way out and he took it. I don't want to say you can't blame him, because that's not the kind of attitude that wins you
He was
fights.
in
But
over his head, to be fair. Like there
yeah,
was a huge talent gap, and I'm never going to blame a fighter if like you don't have the keys to win a fight. You're just there to get hurt. And I think that he thought he could win. His team thought he could win, and they got in, and he just it's like I know I could swim, but can I swim in a 40-foot ocean? I don't know, but I might sign up for it for 20 grand, and then if I can't do it, bring the boat. Bring the boat and the buoy, you know? I can't do it. And that's what I think happened.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And when you've seen what Brian Norman's done to like Chin Sasaki and stuff, you know, it was going to be probably a short, I'd say a long night for Wagner, probably a very short night. So not that he did the right thing in getting out there, because you want to see fighters want to go out on their shield, because that's the mentality that, you know, will one day win you a fight, but he probably saved himself from a bit of a brutal finish.
And it's the end of his career. Like once you make a decision like that, I don't think you can ever compete at a world-class level, because mentally you've caved. Mentally you say there's a level I can't get to. So to me, he might keep fighting. He might take another fight against a high profile. But really, that was the end of his career, because he made a decision that there's a certain level I can't get to.
Yeah, promoters aren't going to give him that chance either. Like, you know, if he kind of goes out on a shield, top rank might be like, oh, we'll have it back. So yeah, no US promoters probably going to give him a chance now. Maybe, probably not even in the UK. Maybe in the UK just because he's built his name just from fighting Brian Norman Jr.
I think there might be like let's say our guy Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's getting into a thing. Ben might want to fight him to say, okay, look what I can do to this guy. Who, you know, I mean, I think that what this does is you go from being a contender level fighter to fighting the best prospects in America who want to prove that they're right there to make the leap. So I think he moved himself down to almost a stepping stone type opponent for the young up and comers across America.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And to be honest, that's probably his level. You know, German boxing's not massive, so he's probably not going to be pulling in big numbers back at home. It's really gone downhill in the last few years, where they're not putting on big shows. They haven't got TV networks. So that's, if he's going to be making any money in the sport, it's going to be being, you know, your gatekeeper, or, you know, being someone to be beaten. So the only thing now is, with that kind of performance and him pulling out so early, promoters probably won't want to take a punt on him, because they'll think, oh, you know, he'll just take a way out. Even though, you know, he's seen it's an easy win, they want rounds for their guys. They want, you know, put on a good show, and that's not what he's going to offer now.
Well, Tom, this has been fun. Why don't you give people all your important stuff that you're doing, and how people can keep up with you. I know I certainly had fun. I haven't fully gotten to know you over the years, but I deeply respect you. And I mean, shoot, I'm probably going to get you on a couple of times a year just so we can talk some crap. But just promote yourself. This is the age of promote yourself, so do it.
Yeah, no, honestly, you can have me on anytime. But yeah, if you want to follow me, Twitter's probably the best place, at Tom Ivers. But yeah, boxing scene, got a few things going on there. But yeah, I'm not the biggest self promoter. I like to just, you know, let the stories and stuff do speak for themselves. But yeah, it's an absolute pleasure being on here, and you can have me on anytime. Honestly, I really appreciate it.
Well, I mean, it's a real good one. It was really fun being around you over the however long we've been doing stuff. And I mean, just seeing the growth that you're doing and just how you're going to continue to elevate the sport. Really fun having you on and a great guest. And I just loved it.
No, I really appreciate it. It's been great. Thank you so much.